I think this crisis meant two things and had two big consequences for Europe in general and for Portugal. One is austerity. Another one is what they call supply-sided measures, these structural measures. So what is happening is that in name of a debt that they say that we've created, but it didn't create. So, for example, in Portugal, before the crisis, the debt was about 70% of the GDP. After the crisis, the debt is 120% of the GDP. So it's proof that the crisis created the debt, and it was not the debt generating the crisis. But still, they made an argument saying that people in the south of Europe lived beyond their means. They lived above their possibilities. They had high wages, generous welfare states. They lived more than and having more than they could afford. So now they have to suffer, and they have to lower wages. They have to cut healthcare services, cut education, and it's the neoliberal strategy that was implemented in Asian countries and in Africa, in Latin America, saying that to create more jobs, we have to lower wages and to liberalize markets. And this has two consequences, direct. Once it's in terms of the own system. Neoliberalism cannot promise in Europe a better life anymore. People in Europe that was always told that, okay, neoliberal capitalism is going to bring you more money, more jobs, better jobs. Now capitalism cannot promise a better life anymore. The only answer to this crisis in Europe is poverty. And this has a very, very deep consequence for the rest of the world, because Europe was supposed to set the standards, the living standards, the working standards. If Europe starts lowering the standards, lowering wages, getting people more poor in order to compete with other countries, the result for the other continents and for the other countries is a race to the bottom. We're going to basically be racing to see who has lower wages, who has lower welfare to compete, to produce more and export more. So this is a crisis with several consequences for also other parts of the globe. I think this crisis shown two things. First, we have to learn from each other, because maybe Asia has to learn from the problems of financialization in Europe and the financial crisis, and they can still stop and prevent some of the problems we had. And we also have to learn how Asia, not only Asia but also Latin America, dealt with IMF. What the IMF and what these neoliberal politics and policies did to this country. We have to learn the lesson, and to refuse this very urgently. These politics don't work, these policies don't work. It is shown, Asia showed us that the IMF doesn't work. And the policies they are implementing now in Portugal and Europe are exactly the same thing they did to Asia and did to other countries. So I think it's a bilateral learning process. Asia has to learn with the financial crisis and how to stop this financialization process, how to protect their own nature and their own local resources. And we have to learn from Asia on the political process and the kind of economic policies they are implementing now in Europe.